I'm interested actually to know if what your experience is like with your clients and fasting versus not and your female population.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I probably get less of that interest once I start when I'm work because I'm working with, like, a lot of ultra marathon runners where
Mm.
it just is one of those things where unless there's, like, a compelling reason to do it, like, we're just not gonna even put it in place, at
Yeah.
least not in a kind of its structure that you described. Because this is kind of like a topic that I was just gonna like comment on from what you said too is like there is a difference in the research from what I can tell in terms of how you actually structure like a 16/8, where I believe it's got better outcomes when you actually do early
Mm.
or a later time restricted. So like actually having that 8-hour window be kind of breakfast through lunch versus
Yeah.
being like, okay, lunch at 1 p.m. is the first thing I ate since, last night's dinner, in which case you kind of have like what I would imagine to be kind of the more metabolically expensive phases of the day for a lot of people or the
Mm.
higher cortisol points of the day. And, you know, so a lot of times I think when I look at this, I'm looking at it as like the biggest thing I'm going to look at first is like when are you working out? So if someone is going to do some fasting or some time restricted eating, I'm usually thinking, well, are you doing your major training session first thing in the morning? If that's the case, then we want to be very careful around that, and we need
Yeah.
a kind of a compelling reason to justify it versus someone who's like, well, you know what, I know I go about my day and then I do my workout kind of mid afternoon or early evening or something like that. I'm a little less worried about it in that scenario because they wake up and they're having their lower metabolic phases of the day kind of in those that first half, and I think they're gonna probably be able to navigate that a little with a little less stress than they will when, like you said, their workouts are kind of more around that feeding period that they're doing. So, again, the context of that is a pretty big one, but I think, like, I don't get a lot of my low carb clients, I don't have a lot of them that are really that, like, compelled to fast outside of,
Mm.
like, what you said, where it's like, oh, I have like a rest day or I have this short 45-minute easy recovery day and I'm not hungry. So I'm just going to kind of like wake up and go and do this run because I'm not being driven to eat and things like that. And some of them will end up kind of in that space almost more like intuitively where they get to a point. It's rarely something where it'd be like like 16 hours off, but getting to 12 happens pretty naturally a lot of times I find with my low carb ketogenic clients where they're just not getting that same kind of pattern of hunger signals as they had when they were on moderate to high carbohydrate diets. So they sometimes just find themselves, I think, maybe getting busy on a less stressful day from a workout standpoint and finding that they're going 12 hours before they start getting that kind of drive to want to eat in the first place.
Yeah, and I think it matters in terms of the overall goal of the individual too. So, a lot of the clients I work with, they have their sort of training goals, but they also want to try and improve body composition as well. And so,
Mhm.
they are across a week, they'll be in a calorie deficit, but it will vary day to day depending on their training. For that individual, I'm always really careful to ensure that most training, if not all, is supported with nutrition because when you are like a lot of our intuition is, well, if I train fasted and then I'm reducing calories there and I'm burning more calories and I'm going to get more favorable outcomes in body composition. Whereas if you're in a calorie deficit and you're running low on calories anyway, to sort of get up and do a training session, you might not have the energy you need to get those fitness gains you want, and also you don't feel very good, and then you sort of feel like, well, that was a bit of a bum session, and it's not very motivating. Whereas I think protecting the training is really important for that calorie deficit client. And then, as you mentioned, just pulling some calories out later in the day, not a whole meal probably. Like I'm not I mean, personally, I like 3 meals a day. I haven't always been that way, but I've certainly moved that way over the last 3 or 4 years. And plus nutrition for training or a snack. But it's easier to sort of think about that if you train in the morning to have really good fuel around there, as you say, that metabolic output, and then think about what you're doing at dinner and can you make adjustments there to sort of shift calories down a little bit to help support that body composition change that they're looking for.